Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good afternoon. The Chairman and members of the Labor and Public Employees Committee. My name is Neil O'Leary and I am the Mayor of the City of Waterbury. I am also here on behalf of CCM. I appreciate the opportunity to speak before this committee. I'm here to talk about some concerns that myself and the CCM members share concerning Senate Bill 134, which is an act concerning severe mental and emotional impairment and workers' compensation coverage. SB 134 would, among other things, provide for medical and full wage replacement under workmen's compensation for local and state police, career and volunteer firefighters, ambulance workers diagnosed with a mental or emotional impairment as of the result of visually witnessing the death or maiming or visually witnessing the immediate aftermath of such death or maiming of another human being. CCM acknowledges and values the important role of public safety personnel have in our communities. We are grateful for their commitment to protect and serve and for the risks they assume on the behalf of Connecticut residents. Further, CCM appreciates the effort the committee has made to eliminate the fiscal impact this proposal would have on local budgets by requiring the state to purchase a workers' compensation insurance policy to provide coverage for claims awarded under this proposal. We think this bill is an important template. I'll repeat, we think this bill is an important template for the state to use when providing additional special benefits or requirements. CCM has no problem with Senate Bill 134 as long as towns and cities incur no additional costs as a result of it. Indeed, towns and cities cannot afford to pay those benefits without the help of the state of Connecticut. Depending on the circumstances, the cost of an individual mental stress case for either partial disability or permanent total claim could range from tens of thousands of dollars to over $1 million for the duration of the claim. Additionally, once an injury is identified as a work-related injury and covered under the workmen's compensation system, and subsequent injury or impairment, which can be casually linked to the initial injury, is also covered by workmen's compensation. This could result in a wide range of potential per claim costs. Without such a state-funded insurance policy in place, local property taxpayers will be forced to shoulder a fiscal impact that will cripple municipal budgets. Historically, CCM has opposed versions of this bill for the following reasons. It would allow individuals to receive special benefits based on a diagnosis by a psychologist, i.e. counselor or therapist, based on their witnessing an event or viewing a crime scene, which could be hours after the event. SB 134 would mandate these benefits as long as the event was casually connected with the employee's employment. An individual would be eligible regardless of whether they were on duty or off duty or required to be at the scene. Secondly, visually witnessing is subject to interpretation and could mean simply viewing photographs or videos of a crime scene or of the deceased or injured. Third, the definition of death is also subject to interpretation and could mean someone may not have actually witnessed a person's last breath, but an individual died at a later date and time and location, such as a hospital, which then could be considered, quote, witnessing of death. Fourth, the definition of maiming is also open to very broad interpretation, forcing municipal officials to devote considerable time and resources to thwart mental disability fraud, which has proven to not be uncommon. And lastly, a diagnosis of mental or emotional impairment, as proposed in SB 134, is highly subjective and could overlap with existing symptoms of depression, substance abuse, or other anxiety disorders. SB 134 is also imprecise as it does not distinguish among the spectrum of mental stress diagnosis. It would effectively cover all impairments from acute stress disorders to post-traumatic stress disorders to longer-term chronic or delayed onset disorders, essentially creating an open-ended eligibility. It should be noted that towns and cities offer health insurance, disability leave, and employee assistance programs, EAPs, to employees suffering from mental or emotional impairments. CCM appreciates that SB134 employs options outside of the workers' compensation system to provide special benefits. The issue of determining how to assist state and local employees who are affected by certain tragic events must be solved with a statewide solution. Again, CCM sees Senate Bill 134 as a template for proposals that would otherwise impose additional costs to towns and cities, and that it realizes the situation the bill attempts to address is a statewide one requiring a statewide solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions or comments? Senator Austin, please.
Good morning, Mayor. Afternoon, evening, whatever we're in now, I'm not really certain anymore. Maybe I'm sorry.
I almost said good morning as well.
That's
my day as well.
So, have you yourself done any analysis beyond CCM on what the percentages of nationally on a post-traumatic stress or stress-related disorder? Because many other states cover this already. Have you done any analysis personally?
I have done some personal analysis. I was a police officer for 32 years, and the last 8 of which I was police chief.
So I worked as a correctional officer for 21 years, and I have watched personally many of my colleagues, although this bill does not cover them, but I have witnessed many of my colleagues after repeated watchings of pulling someone down from a hanging event or pulling apart someone who committed suicide through a variety of means that happens within a correctional facility, end up with stress-related events that were not covered under workers' compensation and are not planned to be covered under this particular workers' compensation, and ended up with with such significant stress. And not everybody suffers this significant distress. Some people never have that significant distress that happens, and quite frankly, NCCI, who does set our workers' compensation rates, and in Connecticut we were lucky enough by NCCI and the state of Connecticut to see a decrease in workers' compensation down across all classifications by a 3.9% decrease in workers' compensation. I'm not certain if KERMA forwarded that all to every municipality, according to the bill I got from KERMA on our workers' compensation in the town where I'm first selectman. We didn't see a decrease, but I think that that is a function of the insurance company, not a function of where the workers' compensation rates are. That NCCI said across the board that those places who offered workers' compensation for stress-related disorders showed it was 0.5% of all of workers' compensation for stress-related disorders. And we narrowed it last year. Did you notice the bill that we actually passed last year for stress-related disorders that addressed most of your issues that you had on workers' compensation, and we would look to do the same sort of language. So if we addressed your issues on tightening up on the maiming, would you be in favor of a workers' compensation bill for stress-related disorders for those first responders that get into these awful situations? And quite frankly, I'd like to see a well-trained police officer return to the job, because we spend a lot of money on training our first responders on both the firefighter and police officer job classifications. So would you, if we tightened up on a couple of things on there, would you then come and support the legislation for workers' compensation for police officers.
That was quite a question, Senator, and I would love
I
to
actually
answer
have
that.
a lot more on it. I'm just letting you know. I actually had a lot more than that because I'm really, I think as a state, we have not done enough for mental health. And we continue to put additional pressures on our first responders. And with all due respect, corrections is different today than it was when I started. I'm old, so it's a different place than when I started. It's a different environment for our police officers and our firefighters today than it was 30-something years ago. I don't know how long you've been mayor, and I don't know if you went right from being a police chief to being mayor. You don't need to answer that. I'm not trying to put you on the spot on age. But I really think that we say that we want our police officers and our firefighters to act always in the utmost professional way, and we say we want you to respond to the 12-year-old who blows his head off, and when you go to the next domestic violence incident in that same day, that we expect you to act professionally. And I agree with that, but we're not giving them the help that they may need to address those issues, and that's a real concern of mine. And I think that we've recognized in our veterans, and I'm a veteran, and we recognize in our veterans that there is a real thing as post-traumatic stress. This is not some made-up disease any longer. There are actual changes in the brain chemistry that can be diagnosed. So what exactly, and not the CCM platitudes on cost, what exactly would you be willing to pay? Because if I'm working on one end to decrease workers' compensation costs, I think that should allow me to take some of that decrease and put it to our first responders who willingly put their lives on the line for us. And some people think that's trite, but it's just not trite. It's true. You know that.
I would never dispute the fact that first responders are subject to PTSD. I don't think anyone here would do such a thing. What I am saying is the language is worded in this proposal is so broad and loose.
So if you wouldn't mind, if you could send me a bullet-pointed change in language that you would be amenable to, that would be helpful to me. And I would look at last year's language and see if that addresses a lot of your issues. So a lot of times when we bring up a raised bill, we have, that we bring back, we regurgitate the previous years. At the end of last year, we came up with a language that I think addresses a lot of your concerns. And if I could have Senator Hartley get you that language or get your contact information. If you have a card, you can leave it. I'll send it to you. You look at that and you tell me if that addresses those issues or those concerns that you have, and let me know if that makes a difference, because that's what I would like to see, is that back and forth dialogue, so that we can start dealing with mental health issues that are amongst our first responders as a result of the job that they do.
I would not be opposed to taking a look at that, of course, and Senator Hartley knows how I feel about the subject as well. Quite frankly, Senator, this bill has not had the collaboration that the presumptuous cancer bill has enjoyed through the efforts of all the folks who have spoken for you, including obviously Representative Cook. Quite honestly, I don't think that there has been enough collaborative effort to talk about this and the ramifications and the problems, and there are so many of them. For instance, can I just give you an example, since I've heard a lot about corrections, which I'm very unfamiliar with. The only thing I have to do with corrections during my career in law enforcement would be to interview suspects inside a correction facility.
Correct.
I have no experience in corrections. But for instance, some of the things that are glaring here is In a city like Waterbury, if you respond to a shooting in progress and get there tonight, you'll find someone with their head blown off in the street, as you
Yep.
had mentioned earlier. You'll probably have anywhere from 12 to 15 officers, maybe even more, that'll respond to that scene because it's an in-progress call, okay? One of the issues that's glaring is, will all 12 or 15 officers be, they may respond to the call. They may even see the body laying in the roadway. But the fact is, it's such a slippery slope. I hope you can appreciate what I'm saying. And the fact is that urban police departments, Bridgeport, Hartford, New Haven, Stamford, New Britain, Marion,
London,
we're
Norwich.
faced with these types of incidents, unfortunate as the world is as it seems today, very frequently.
Correct.
And so as a municipal leader, in a different role than police chief, now trying to put budgets together and to protect our sworn personnel and do all the right things, we're trying not, and also to protect the taxpayers, of course, we're trying to do the right thing for both sides. There's been a lot of discussion that I'm familiar with concerning the presumptive cancer bill that will be spoken about at length, and I admire all these firefighters that are here today feeling so strongly about it. We have not enjoyed that kind of dialogue on SB134.
So I can tell you that CCM has sat in this room for 4 years and never reached out to see what they would like, and I've asked this question every time they have sat in front of us to say, what would you like? And I'm a member of CCM as a first selectman. So that's a two-way street on what we're doing. So there have been opportunities to come up. I've asked for language, and I've incorporated the language that they would like to see in this legislation each time they brought it up. Cooperation doesn't mean completely rolling over on everything. There's a two-way street on that. So there has been dialogue, and many of the things that were addressed by CCM and cost were addressed in the legislation that passed last year. It's something that I think that both sides could do, and I've made myself available and have been on meetings all day today with a variety of people on a variety of different issues. I'm a Democrat. I met with the Yankee Institute today. I'm more than willing to meet with people who have an opposite view of anything that I put out there. It is important to get different views. But last year we passed a piece of legislation that addressed many of those issues as a result of the public hearing testimony that CCM and cost and other mayors and first selectmen had put in on the bill. So I want to send you that language and see if that addresses some of those issues. Now, to your talk on the incident where you might have 15 people respond, it's akin to an all available in a correctional environment where every responder goes, because in most in an active shooting event you want as many people there because you don't know what you're running into. You might get the person that I had resident troopers in the town that were given resident trooper assignments in order to deal with the shootings that they had been involved in, and a lot of times it's the cumulative effect, not that initial event. So you might have somebody that comes to an active shooting event that this is not their first time. You talk about the fact that urban areas have continued events over and over and over again, and at some point it might have that wearing down event. And what one of my biggest worries about all of this is, and far be it from me to point out, but almost everybody here is a man in an environment, and none of you are supposed to be ever needing any help. And what we have ended up with, and I know that you had a tragedy in your city last year with a police officer who committed suicide. I look on that as a failure of ours. not a failure of the person's, but a failure of ours to not recognize that we have to give people the opportunity to ask for help. And that's something that really bothers me. Since I've left corrections, I've had 15 of my colleagues commit suicide and not get the help that they need. That's a large number of people that are no longer around for us. And I see the same thing happening in municipal and state